Oh, the parades were wonderful. We would use the same area that we use now to go downtown, go around Carlisle Drugstore and come back around again and come back over here to the schools. The baseball games out on the baseball fields that are there now. The loud music, the laughter, the happiness that you could hear, the joy, which you still hear some of, thanks to the recreational department and Reverend Cooper and what they're doing here, and the others that are working under him. But I can remember, because I live right at the end of these fields, I can remember, I can almost hear now the gaiety, the laughter, the cheering, the jazz, I guess you call it the honky-tonk music and all of that during those times, which you'll never forget if you ever really listen to. And I guess during the 50s, when you had the bobby socks and the long skirts and all that, that was all a part of that time.
Miss Coley taught for many years. Her grandfather was the principal of the Alexander City Colored School, and both her parents were teachers.
Started at the Alexander City Elementary School under L.L. Steele. Left there and went over and taught under Mr. Evans. After that time, Mr. Wagner, Richard Wagner, wonderful principals. Thank goodness I always loved the administrators that were in charge of the schools where I was. Didn't ever want to leave any of them, but through some way, Mr. Wagner encouraged me to go ahead, and after I went back to school in counseling, to come on over and be a part of the middle school, where I've been now for the last 5 years as guidance counselor. Those have been wonderful years.
In 1879, a one-story school was completed on the hill where the Alexander City Middle School now stands. In 1887, Mr. J.D. Dixon and Mr. J.M. Pearson assumed control of the school. Dixon taught in the east end of the building and Pearson in the west end, with no partition between. Textbooks used by the 75 or 80 children in the school were donated and were not uniform. Students used slates and slate pencils in the high-ceilinged room that was heated by open grates and stoves. Water was carried from a spring in the back of the building. Students paid tuition to support the school. The Alexander City High School building was started in 1908, completed in 1909, and accredited in 1910, consisting of grades 1 through 10. Russell Mills established Russell School in 1919, and in 1920 a school was provided for the children of Avondale Mill employees. J.W. Graves and Miss Roxy Dunaway were teachers in a resident building on Maple Street until 1924, when a modern brick building was erected near Avondale Mills. Mr. H.P. Stewart became the principal of the Alexander City Colored School in 1909.
In the year of 1919, moved to Alexander City and began going to school, what was known as the city school. The Professor Henry Powers Stewart was the principal.
A pot-bellied stove heated the three-room school in the winter.
And there were 3 rooms, 1 upstairs and 2 downstairs. And the teacher, one was Ms. Estelle Allen. She taught the middle class upstairs, and downstairs was Professor Stewart's wife, Estelle Stewart, and she taught the younger children, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade. And in the other room, Professor Stewart had the older, I'll say, boys and girls. And there were about 15 in our class.
Mrs. Jewel Barnes fondly remembered some of her experiences under Professor W.T. Darnell Sr. at the Alexander City Colored School.
When I came here, I was 8 years old, and I started school under Professor W.J. Darnell Sr. And the teachers was, as I can remember, was Mrs. Hallie Hopper, Mrs. Ford, Mrs. Genevieve Maxwell, and W.J. Darnell Jr., which was Miss Gwen Coley's father. So W.J. Darnell Sr. was the grandfather of Miss Gwen Coley.
In 1925, the city's first grammar school was constructed. The building was destroyed by fire in 1948. A new building was completed in 1949 and named the Alexander City Junior High School. The first yearbook was called The Mirror and was published in 1928. The first graduating class of Alexander City Colored High School consisted of Daniel Owens, Inez Buckner, Ophelia Moon, and Annie Pearl Cardwell. The first school newspaper of the Alexander City High School was started in 1933, called the Cinder, referring to the railroad where people standing too close might get a cinder in their eye. The Cinder was started by Ralph Frozen and Benny Russell. During the 1940s, the first Alexander City High School band was formed. Planning of a new high school and fundraising to build it was initiated and led by Benny Russell, W.D. Graves, and Dr. Jesse Miller. Funding came from three sources: the Russell Educational and Charitable Foundation, a $100,000 gift from Avondale Mills, and public conscription. The school, which cost over $1 million, was built without any federal money. The new high school was named Benjamin Russell High School and opened in 1950. Laurel High School opened in 1952. Councilwoman Barbara Young served in many positions as an educator, principal of Radney Elementary School, PE teacher, and guidance counselor at Benjamin Russell High School. Throughout the years, she experienced changes in the school system.
Well, beginning in about 1967, I think, 67 or 68, we had a limited type of integration of the races. Some of the Laurel students who wanted to come into Benjamin Russell were permitted to come. Some of our white teachers were assigned to Laurel, which was a black school. So we had what we called choice at that time, limited integration as a kind of the forefront of beginning full integration. And then in 1970, the board, and it was a very fine board, the Board of Education, determined that we should fully integrate our schools. So Avondale School, which had been primarily a school for the Avondale employees' children, Russell School, which was primarily for Russell employees' children, became system-wide schools. We had Avondale, or Jim Pearson, became the first and second grade. This was before we had kindergartens. Laurel School at that time, which is now Stevens, became third and fourth. Russell School, which is now Radney School, was the fifth and sixth. And then our junior high school was 7 through 9, and Benjamin Russell then was 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. And that continued until we put in the kindergarten at Jim Pearson, and then we moved our 9th grade from what we now call the middle school into the high school.
For many students, lifelong memories and friendships were made at homecoming games and on prom nights and senior trips.
Well, I'll have to say my first year is kind of like your first love. I remember my first senior class. My first senior class included people like Laura Oliver, who later became my secretary at Radney School, Fred Dobbs, Jerry Allen. You know, I kind of date myself with these. And my experience with them as my first senior class, we went through the short skirts, the mini skirts. And because I was a 9th grade counselor for the girls, it was not the whole grade, it was just for the girls, I was given the job of measuring skirts. Now, if you can imagine, and of course we've been through this since then, as you're well aware, but at this time the skirts were coming right on up, and it was quite a change in what we had been doing. And so Barbara Young was given the job of measuring, and I always had my measuring stick. This was required of me, and we found that, and the students finally realized, if you had on a miniskirt and white stockings, it looked shorter than if you had on a miniskirt and black stockings. So they had that little way of getting around it. But then, and we met with the merchants in town. You know, this affected the whole town. We met with the merchants. In fact, they gave us a fashion show to show us what was coming in, you know, so that we would not be a backwards community. And we did the famous 3 inches above the top of the knee. That was the line, 3 inches above the top of the knee.
The Alexander City State Junior College opened in 1963 in an old Russell Hospital building on Lee Street, with 442 students enrolled. Byron Causey, who was at that time serving as principal of Benjamin Russell High School, became the college's first president on February 1st, 1965. At age 37, he was one of the youngest of junior college presidents. In 1966, the college moved to the old Alex City Country Club site, its present location. In 1988, the college became known as the Central Alabama Community College.